interrupt everybody's lunch, but I'm going to introduce our lunch speaker. My name is Erin Abrahamson. I'm the Chief of Staff here at the National Center, and I get the pleasure of introducing Lillian Sparks Robinson. She is a member of the National Center Board, and she's also owner of her own company, Wopila Consulting. So, here's Lillian.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I know it's always so hard to come in and speak while people are in the middle of eating and catching up and trying to answer their emails and figure out the rest of their day. But I'm going to do the best that I can. So as mentioned, my name is Lillian Sparks Robinson. My Lakota name is Wanakshnawi, which means flower woman. I'm a member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe and the daughter of Leroy Sparks and Georgeline Brushbreaker Sparks, who reside in Baltimore, Maryland. My father has passed, but my mom has remained in Maryland. And the granddaughter of Lillian Poor Thunder Badhand and George Brushbreaker of South Dakota and Thelma and Vernon Sparks of Maryland. I introduced myself to you in that way because that's the way I was taught, that's the way I was raised, and that's how you're able to determine also if there are family members in the audience, because I often meet relatives, especially when I'm outside of the D.C. area, and let folks know who I am and where I come from. So I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. I moved here for a little while in D.C., but I still live in Baltimore with my husband, Corey, and our 8-year-old son, Connor Robinson. Remember that name because I predict one day he's going to win the Heisman or Defensive Player of the Year or something along those lines. That is his ultimate goal. So... Well, I said, I want you to be president. And he said, no, that looks too hard. And you have to say hi to people all the time. And I was like, yeah, that's true. You do have to say hi to people. So I am a owner, business owner, small business owner. And I also have the opportunity to represent a number of Native-owned 8A companies through the work I do with the National Center here, as well as with the Native American Contractors Association. And so I grew up, again, in Baltimore, Maryland, which is a ways from my tribe, which is based out of South Dakota. And my mom and dad did their best to make sure my sister and all the cousins that were sent out to us every year had a deep understanding and were completely grounded in our cultural values, in our Lakota ways, our traditional ways of life, and had an identity of being a Lakota. Even though I'm also African American, my mom made sure I knew who I was as a Native woman as well, because she knew it would be difficult for me living outside of our Native community to be able to make those same types of relationships. And so I'm proud to be able to say that, the work I've done has always been steeped in tribal policy and in tribal politics, and always in the public sector, but now I'm in the private sector. And I didn't think I'd ever be here in this place. And the reason being is that, growing up, you have all your ideas of what it is that you want to do, and your thoughts about where your life will take you. And so growing up in Baltimore, I always excelled in math and science and just thought that would be my path. And so I entered Morgan State University, which is a small HBCU, or actually it's not that small anymore. It was small when I went there, but it's really big now. Located in my hometown of Baltimore on a full scholarship for engineering. And I spent my first 2 years, really just digging in deep and trying to get a great understanding of the concepts that were placed there, and the theories and all of the formulas. But it was not loving the work that I was doing. There's very little interaction that was happening. And so my junior year, I switched to political science and always had a love for just how are laws made, how are policies done. My high school sent me to serve as an intern for the General Assembly in Maryland my senior year. And so I had an opportunity to see it firsthand, how it was done at the local level. And so I thought, well, I always enjoyed it. Let me go back and see that. So political science was my major. And when I graduated Morgan, I knew that I wanted to continue my education. And so I applied and got accepted and moved on to Georgetown Law School. And when I entered law school, my intention was to be a criminal defense attorney. And that's because one of my professors at Morgan was also an attorney. And he always used to say, for those of you going on to law school, criminal defense, you'll always have a client, especially if you stay in Baltimore. And so it just rang true with me. I was like, well, I don't plan on doing a whole lot, moving anywhere, so this would be great. But when I graduated law school, I returned again to my first love, which is policy and advocacy and legislation, and graduated knowing that I wanted to work on behalf of Indian country in that particular field and in those arenas. And so, unlike my other law school counterparts, I didn't graduate with 5 job offers. I didn't graduate with any job offers because I wasn't putting my name out there until I knew exactly what it is I wanted to do. And I took the bar, and I remember there was someone who recognized, or someone that called on me, Indian attorney in D.C. He knew the bar was that week. He called me that Thursday, hey, how do you think you did? I said, I think I did okay. We talked about it. He said, well, there's a Native American Bar Association meeting happening next week. You should come through. And so he said, I'll introduce you to the Indian law community in D.C. So I attended that meeting, and as soon as I walked in, he introduced me, and someone else recognized me and said, yes, she just graduated law school, and she's looking for a job. Aren't you looking for a job? I said, I am. And she said, well, and that's what we're here for. We're, Indian lawyers. We have a responsibility to the new Indian lawyers coming up. Let's see, let her know of your resources. So someone had mentioned, well, NCAI, I believe, is hiring. They're looking for a ledge association, if you like, legislation and policy. And I just thought, immediately, bingo, this is where I'm supposed to be at this time, here, now, in this room with these folks who had since gone on to become mentors, colleagues, and people that I've been able to brainstorm and really talk about the difficulties of navigating Washington, D.C. politics, tribal politics, and then our own little community politics as well. And so from there, I remember the weekend came, and I was a very competitive fancy dancer at the time. And so we traveled all over, up and down the East Coast, dancing at Powell's. In fact, someone recognized me earlier today, and from 20, well, I said 5 years ago, she said 30, but so from dancing, and someone recognized me from that meeting and just said, hey, weren't you at a meeting? Aren't you looking for a job? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, well, that's Jackie Johnson. She's the ED. You should go introduce yourself. And so I went up, introduced myself to Jackie. She said, here's my card. Call me on Monday. I called her on Monday, told her, what my experience had been thus far. I told her what I was hoping to be able to do, what my goals were career-wise. And she scheduled an interview for me that Wednesday. And then on that Friday, she made an offer for my first job ever out of law school. And so I share that story to tell folks it's really important to make sure that you have a clear sense of what it is that you want to do, what your end goal is, even if you don't know the path on how it is that you're going to get there. And I was able to really rely on my faith over my fear to be able to get me there. And I credit having a strong sense of who I am as a Lakota woman as well, and knowing my traditional and cultural values to help guide me through those times when I was doubting whether or not this was the right fit for me, and then really being able to clearly process what was happening and then moving forward. And I think that all of us can be able to do that. We can lead and we can succeed with our cultural values and our traditional ways, and using that as the basis for the work that we do. So my company, Wopula Consulting, people always say, well, what does that mean? What is Wopula? Well, if you're a Lakota or a Sioux, you know that most people just say, Wopes or Wopula or Pilamia, and that means thank you. It's a way of just saying thank you. But Wopula is actually much more than that. That's the most formal way you can thank somebody, and it's an expression of gratitude. I guess if there's a way to put it in English, it is, our most highest expression of gratitude. And I named my company Wopula because I was so grateful for all of the experiences and all that I've done this far to get me where I was, and the sacrifices that were made that I couldn't even see or understand or would ever be able to fully comprehend that others made, just so that I could be a small business woman. And our goal is to be able to give back to the community, to get to a place where we can create a foundation where really the profits and proceeds are used to support communities and young people and old people and all people who are in need and who are just looking for some additional and extra assistance. But in the meantime, we're doing still policy work and subbing on numerous government contracts. And again, not necessarily where I thought I'd be, given that I started out in electrical engineering, then moved on to criminal defense, and then finally found my way to lobbying, legislative advocacy type of work. So at NCAI, I was able to work for a few years on a couple of areas, really gain my experience and the wisdom that I needed to understand how to better relate to people, how to better translate the work that's being done so that people on the Hill could understand what our community needs are, what our economic development needs are, and how it is their responsibility to be able to help us, to help shape what it is that would impact generations long after I was gone, done, and retired from this particular type of work. And I say that because our 4 cultural values that Wopiel is founded on, but that also have guided my life and my career when I look back, are wisdom, bravery, fortitude, and generosity. And so I always say I started gaining wisdom, not in a weird, elder way where I can impart it to others, but really just the knowledge that's going to be the basis for how I move and operate forward. And I learned from so many people who were official and unofficial mentors at that time, and got a chance to do things like spend 2 weeks at a time in Geneva, Switzerland at the United Nations, primarily because no one else wanted to go, but it allowed me to be able to sit in rooms with national leaders and see how our United Declaration Rights for Indigenous Peoples was being developed, what those negotiations behind doors and on the mics looked like. And I used that experience to really think about what is everyone's perspective and what is it that everyone can gain from that. So from there, I was recruited to join the National Indian Education Association as their executive director. And I initially declined the request to submit my name because I didn't think I was ready. I didn't think I was had enough experience. I never managed staff. I never managed a budget at this time. I'm still in my mid to late 20s. And a friend said to me, Lillian, as Native women, when someone asks us to do something, we have a responsibility to honor that request, especially if it's helping you. And when she said that, it just a light bulb went off because she was also applying, but she didn't see me as her competition. She didn't see me as someone that she was trying to knock out of the way. She saw me as her friend first and someone who could possibly lead this organization. And so I applied and was offered the position to lead the National Indian Education Association. And I was, scared, beepless, and because we're being recorded. And I really just did not know where to begin at first. But once again, I had mentors that came in and swooped me under their wing and shared with me how to draft budgets, how to manage to a budget, how to evaluate staff, how to create programming, how to make sure that your organization is making the most of its members, and how you're able to leverage that into policy. And while we were there, we were able to pass the Esther Martinez Native American Act. And so for me, it was an act of bravery to be able to move forward and command rooms and command convention centers and command an audience on the Hill that really addressed the needs of our most vulnerable population, which are our youth and our children living in tribal areas. From there, was nominated to be the Commissioner for Administration for Native Americans at Department of Health and Human Services. Senate confirmed political appointment, and was, again, doubting whether or not this was where I was supposed to be. Did I have, the experience? Was my resume strong enough to actually see this through? But at this time, I knew what it take to push through that fear. And so my fortitude kicked in terms of understanding the strength that I needed to be able to answer these questions, to have someone dig, in my background, which was not, crystal clean, to have people ask me what I thought about very controversial issues. I had enough faith in myself that I've done this much so far, and if it wasn't meant for me, then I was okay with that. And just having that fortitude to move forward when times were tough, I think really allowed me to be able to move into that position. And from there, I knew that would be the last time, though, that I would be working for someone else, the goal for me at that point was when I left my appointment that I would start my own business and that I would work for myself. And no one in my family is an entrepreneur. And so I didn't have a model, but I knew that I could do this if I just worked hard enough, if I felt like my work was speaking for itself at this point, and I just had to have faith in myself. And so from there, we created Wopula. When I say we, because I still think of it as a family business in the sense that my mom and dad impacted so much about how it is that I was going to be doing the work that I was, how I was going to be deliberate about the clients that I chose, how it was that I was going to treat the staff and the employees and make sure that they were valued and they understood that I prioritized them, but I wanted them to prioritize their families. And so how did that all work? How did that come into play? And we talked about again, what's the cornerstone of the work that we do at Wopula? What is the basis for how we move forward? And we want to make sure that at each time and at each interaction that we are somehow taking in and sharing wisdom, that we're being brave with the decisions that we're making, that we will see the tough times through, and they're there. They continue to be there. I say this last year was probably my most difficult year as a business owner, and it's not because business was slow, but there were just so many changes that were happening internally that really humbled me to remind me of, again, going back to the values, going back to my faith, to knowing that we'd be able to succeed and come out still on top this year. And then generosity, that my company would continue to give and support in ways that we could, and that we would continue to share not just financial resources, but we would share our experiences, we would share our resources in terms of our connections, our network, helping to build those relationships outside of Washington, D.C. for our clients, so that way they're not so reliant just on federal funding, but it could also find ways to do some philanthropic partnerships and get some private investors into some of the work that they're doing. And this is what we continue to do at Wopula, and this is how we are able to continue to lead and hopefully succeed by using our cultural values as our basis. That at any time when we start to doubt whether or not we're doing the work in a way that's meaningful, that we reflect on, are we imparting the virtues of wisdom, bravery, fortitude, and generosity? And are we making sure we are leaving much more than what we came with? And at times when it is that we are beginning to doubt whether or not this is the right direction, relying on our faith, relying on the understanding that the work that we're doing was almost preordained by people that came way before us, that our ancestors had worked long and hard to make sure we were in that room at that time, on that day, in that place, and that we just had to fulfill what it is that they envisioned, and that we have to help create that roadmap and that path for the next generations coming up after us, so that way when they're in their classrooms, or they're in the boardrooms, or they're in their community centers, or whatever their career path is, that they know that they have had the work of all of us here in this room help hopefully support and uplift them so that they can be in there comfortably and confidently and successfully. And so for us at Wopula, I always say, we lead with our values, and then we let the work speak for itself. And I encourage you to do that as business leaders, as business owners, as you might have been in business for 10 years and you might be looking to recalibrate and think about what it is that you're going to do next. Or maybe you're switching, from one sector to the next. And think about what your own cultural values are and what your tribe and your traditions and your ceremonies, where they have brought you to this point in your life. And reflect on that and allow that to guide you on your next chapter, your next journey, as well as allow you to hopefully, again, share your wisdom, be brave in the decisions that you make, continue to press on with fortitude, but most importantly, be generous. Be generous with your time, with your heart, with your resources, financially when you can, and just what you've learned so far. And I thank the National Center for allowing me to, visit with all of you here today, for allowing me to continue to serve on the board. I'm not the treasurer anymore. That was a brave step for me, actually, because if anyone knows me, I love money, but I don't like dealing with money. And so I don't like managing it. I have to do it. It's hard when it's especially for other folks. And so I took a leap of faith on that and had great mentors and, our board chair, other board chairs with our own president, and have thankfully passed that on to someone else who has the time to be able to do that. I just share that with you because every day I'm learning, every day I'm challenging myself, every day I'm asking myself to do more and to do better than I've done before, and I think that's why I've been able to press on, and why opportunities have. I haven't been afraid to create opportunities for me. I won't say that they've been there. I say I try to create the opportunities, because you can't wait for anything to fall in your lap. You have to go out there and go after it. But again, I just call on you to reflect upon what it is you've learned throughout your life, what your experiences have been, and allow that to confidently guide you to your next goalpost. So thank you. I won't be here much longer. I do have to run off, but I'll be here probably for like the next 20 to 30 minutes. And I'd love to just, connect with you and learn more from each of you as well. So take care.